The following program is an original production of Link TV. They are 1/5 of the world's population, 1.2 billion people, Muslims. 56 countries from North Africa to Southeast Asia have Muslim majorities. While the Muslim people are a diverse group, the relationships between the United States and the Muslim world are too often marked by conflict and distrust. Many Americans, Muslims in other countries, and people around the world yearn for more peaceful and respectful relations.
The relationship between the United States and the Muslim world is the single largest issue of national security and safety to both the U.S. population and the rest of the world that we've faced since perhaps the nuclear standoffs.
It's particularly important to have a real initiative to change America's mode of interaction with the Muslim world and hopefully change their perceptions of us in the process.
America, I think, is an exceptional nation, and what we are for and should be for is diversity, respect for other religions.
Many people fear that further deterioration in U.S. Muslim relations will continue to fuel the growth of extremism and the risk of catastrophic attacks. To address this concern, two groups dedicated to building consensus came together to create the U.S. Muslim Engagement Project.
Overall, what we're looking to do here is signal the need for a substantial change of course and the opportunity for that change of course to lead to substantial improvement in relations.
But what should that change of course look like? What kinds of new strategies are needed? 34 experienced American leaders were called to be part of the U.S. Muslim Engagement Project's leadership group. The group includes a former Secretary of State, former members of Congress, a retired general, and other leaders from diverse religious, cultural, political, and business backgrounds. 1/3 of the members are Muslim, and all members of the leadership group gather around one table.
You had people of diverse views who came together for a reason. The reason was to see, are there bridges? Can we build understanding? Is there a way to transform the reality? The one thing's very clear. If you get together only with people who agree with you, well, what's the point? When you have basic misunderstandings, you have to find ways to see if they can be overcome.
Over 18 months, the group discussed, disagreed, and ultimately overcame differences to find common ground on dozens of specific recommendations on a wide range of issues detailed in this report. Changing course, a new direction for U.S. relations with the Muslim world. The new course they recommend focuses primarily on what actions the U.S. can take, but it also stresses the role of the leaders and peoples of Muslim-majority countries.
When we ask Muslims around the world what the Muslim world can do to improve relations with the West, their most frequent response is about controlling extremism. So there is a recognition among Muslims that this is a problem. In fact, when asked what their greatest fear is, many people say that their greatest fear in their own country is being a victim of terrorist attack.
In the U.S., misunderstandings abound. Polls show nearly half of Americans consider most Muslims to be violent, but only a tiny minority are. Many Americans also regard the conflict with the Muslim world to be inevitable. But hard data from the Gallup Center for Muslim Studies, which conducts polling across the Muslim world, found exactly the opposite.
The most important finding, though, was that the conflict between the United States and Muslim populations around the world is not inevitable, because anger is at our perceived actions, not our values or our principles. They talk about what they admire most about the West in general is transparency of government, the rule of law.
In other words, the so-called clash of civilizations, so widely discussed in Western media, is not borne out by what Muslims around the world say they want. While Muslims say they are frustrated by American actions, they admire American values, including broad support for democracy. The polling data also showed strong support for women's rights, including the right to vote. Majorities of Americans and Muslims abroad say they want peace and amicable relations, although there are certainly caveats.
There are important religious and cultural differences that are not easily resolved. But fundamentally, we think there's a series of policies and actions that we can change and they can change that can begin to create a much more peaceful relationship between the United States and the larger Muslim world.
We can work with problems, we can resolve problems when we have built relationships.
To build this improved relationship, the leadership group recommends a blueprint for change resting on 4 pillars. In short, diplomacy to resolve conflicts, better governance, economic reform, and mutual respect and understanding. The pillars are closely linked.
It's very important to see all 4 going together. I've always had a very hard time in any discussion that I have about political, economic, or ideological issues to separate them from each other, and I think when anything is complicated, you talk about it as multifaceted. So this is in fact a multifaceted issue, and those 4 pillars go together.
I think that what we have to say is, yeah, we have to be able to use force when it's in our national interests. But we also know that some of the deep-seated economic problems, cultural problems, political problems that exist in the region help to recruit people into terrorist movements that are precisely the thing that we're trying to fight in this country.
The first pillar calls on the U.S. government to use diplomacy as the main tool for resolving conflicts involving Muslim countries. The leadership group was passionate about this point.
On the table, and I think we should forcefully say that currently the options of conversation, dialogue, diplomacy, and even negotiations have been profoundly taken off the table in too many cases.
One crucial case for diplomacy is the U.S. relationship with Iran. The report calls on the U.S. government to engage with Iran to explore the potential for agreements that could increase regional security.
So there is a competition with Iran throughout the region, and the question is how to deal with it. If you look at their behavior in fact is changeable from time to time. So it's in our interest to see if there's a way to alter Iranian behavior. I believe it's possible to change the Iranian behavior, but I think it requires a combination of sticks and carrots.
The report also calls for the U.S. to work intensively for de-escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a viable path to a 2-state solution that ensures the security of both peoples.
The U.S. has to be more involved diplomatically in trying to resolve a problem that's very difficult. I don't think anybody would say that it's been easy and people haven't worked on it, but it isn't the only issue, but it is the one that is pointed to a great deal as a sign that the 2 worlds can't come together.
The first pillar also calls for deepening U.S. investments in conflict resolution and political reconciliation in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan.